Hello everybody, my name is Alicia and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to start a new series on my channel that I'm basically going to be calling From RAGS to RAD. And it's going to essentially be like a thrift flip, except instead of taking like thrifted clothing, I'm going to be taking like either really badly damaged clothing with like holes and stains in it, or even just like random pieces of fabric and that sort of thing, and I'm going to be upcycling them and turning them into something new. And I have been getting a lot of like really badly damaged clothes from doing my mystery thrift hauls. I wanted to be able to do something with all of these like pieces of fabric and clothing that I'm receiving. So the first thing that I wanted to upcycle today are these pair of sweatpants that you might have seen from my first mystery thrift haul. They're a really nice pair of like gray root sweatpants. The only problem is they are very like torn up, so this whole leg, like bottom of this leg, is missing. And you might be thinking like, oh Alicia, like why don't you just like turn these into like a really cute pair of sweat shorts? But the only problem is there's a huge hole in the back as well, so I feel like this would be really hard to salvage as pants. So what I'm thinking of doing is turning them into a bucket hat. And I've been pretty obsessed with making bucket hats recently, so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to turn this pair of sweatpants into a bucket hat. And I actually really like the quality of this fabric. I think that's gonna like turn out really good. I think it's gonna look really cool as a bucket hat. Basically my plan for these is I wanted to salvage the logo, so I think that would be really cool as like the front panel of like the headband of the bucket hat. And then these actually have a drawstring on them, which would be like the perfect opportunity to make one of these like string bucket hats. Basically like this one that I made where it has a like drawstring on the bottom. So I think that would turn out really cute. So that is going to be the first thing that we're going to turn from RAGS to RAD, hopefully. We'll see how it turns out. So the first thing that I did was remove the drawstring from the pants and put that away for later. Then I grabbed my patterns that I used from the last time I made a bucket hat. I actually created my own brim pattern because I didn't love how the other one looked. So then I took my fabric and laid it out and put the circle pattern on top of it. And I began to pin the pattern down to the fabric. Once it was pinned, I took my scissors and cut around the pattern until I had the top part of the bucket hat. So next I found where the logo was on the pants and I folded it down the center of the beaver. And then I placed my pattern on top and made sure that this fold was located in the correct spot. Once I had one piece of my headband, I went ahead and cut out the other, so I had two. I then finished cutting out the rest of the pieces for the brim so that now we have all of our patterns ready to be sewn. So first I took the two headband pieces and put them on top of each other, making sure that the good sides are facing each other. And I pinned the sides in place. Then I sewed on both sides until the brim was attached together and in one piece. Next I pinned the top of the hat to the headband and sewed those two pieces together. Now that they're attached, it's starting to look a little bit more like a hat. So all that's left to do is the brim. Similarly to what we did with the headband, I took two pieces of the brim and put them together, this time sewing along the bottom part of the piece. Once those two pieces are sewn together, you have half a semicircle. You can repeat that process on the other one. I then took the two pieces that I just sewed and laid them together, making sure that the seams that I just created lined up. And now you're going to sew the top of those two pieces together. When you unfold it, you should now have this kind of like donut looking shape. Now we have to make the brim a little more sturdy, and this is actually my favorite part because it's super easy and like really satisfying to do. But we're basically just going to sew a bunch of lines on the brim next to each other, about a few centimeters apart, just to give it a little bit more structure. I think I ended up doing about 5, but basically just do as many until you get to the end. Then you just have to attach the brim to the rest of the hat, and our bucket hat is almost complete. The final touch is going to be adding the drawstring, which I just quickly attached to the inside of either side of the hat. And our bucket hat is complete. So this is how the bucket hat turned out, and it turned out pretty much exactly how I wanted it to. I think it looks really cute. It's definitely more of like a floppier kind of bucket hat, but I really like that. And I think using the drawstring actually worked out really well as the strap. I was kind of worried that it was going to be too thick, but like when you see it on, I think it like works pretty well actually. And I think this was like the perfect way to transform those sweatpants. And I don't know if Roots has ever sold their own bucket hats, but I'd be really interested to see what they would look like if they did. Like, I wonder if there's any that look like really similar to this, because I've never seen them before. So this is actually gonna be for sale on my Depop if you are interested. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to upcycle is this dress. It's just this like really cute burgundy colored dress. The top half is more like a sweater material, and then the bottom half is almost like a dress shirt with like buttons on it. And unfortunately this dress had a ton of holes on the front, and I actually tried to repair them, but unfortunately they're just so big that it's really hard to actually hide them. Everywhere else seems to be like pretty fine, so it's really just this middle section here that I can't work with. So my plan for this one is to actually just remove this whole bottom part here and just work with the top like sweater half. And I was kind of thinking like maybe I could turn this into a cardigan or something, but I would have to cut out so much space here that it's not going to be able to like button up anymore. So I thought what would be really cool is if I actually turn this into a shrug, which is essentially a cardigan. They're just typically like more cropped, and they don't have buttons. Instead, they're actually cut like here to here kind of, and it's like a lot more open. It's not meant to be like closed up and buttoned up like a cardigan. So I thought that would be very cute, especially because I've heard that shrugs are kind of coming back in style, and I think it would turn out really cute. Okay, so let's get started. So I started by steam ripping the skirt portion of the dress so that I can remove it from the sweater. Once the skirt was removed, I then cut a line through the middle of the sweater so that it was split into two at the front. I then folded each side in order to hide the holes and give it more of that open look. I also made sure to measure so that both sides were even. Next, I pinned the folds in place so that they'd be ready to be sewn. And then I basically just sewed a straight stitch down either side of the sweater in order to give the edges a more clean look. And lastly, I just cut off all the excess fabric, and the shrug is now complete. So here is the shrug. I think it turned out so cute, and it was honestly so easy to make. Like, definitely an easy project if you are a beginner, and I think it was just like naturally the perfect length where it's like super cropped, and it was a pretty simple DIY, but I think it just like really transformed the piece considering like it used to be a dress. So this is also going to be on my Depop. As much as I love it, I just don't need another like cardigan sweater type thing. So yeah, check out my Depop if you are interested in this one. So for the final upcycle, I have this giant sheet here. It's just this like white, I'm not sure if it was originally a bed sheet or a tablecloth. I think it might have been a tablecloth, but I have this like a ton of white fabric to work with here. It does have some pilling throughout, and there is a bit of a stain right there. I don't know if you can really see, but it's like this little purpley stain. So I might be a little bit in over my head here, but I wanted to turn this bedsheet tablecloth into a tennis skirt, because why would I make anything if it isn't trendy, obviously. And come to think of it, I don't think I've ever made a piece of clothing from scratch before. I mean, I made the bucket hats, but it's a little bit different because it's just like going on your head, but this is gonna have to like actually fit me. So that's gonna be interesting. And also, I hope I have enough fabric here. I think I do. It's like quite a bit, so that should be okay, I hope. So from the videos I've watched on how to make this, it does seem like relatively simple, just kind of like a lot of work. So let's see how this goes. So first I started by taking my waist and hip measurements. Then I laid out my fabric and began to measure out triple the length of my waist. It has to be triple because of the amount of folds that we're going to end up doing. I also measured out my desired skirt length. I went a little bit longer because you can always hem it more at the end, but you can't add fabric back on. Once I had my piece all measured out, I cut it out. I decided I wanted to have 17 pleats in my skirt, so I took my waist measurement and divided it by 17 in order to determine how thick each pleat would be. I then went ahead and marked out each pleat line. So because my pleats were going to be about 2 inches, I put a mark at every 2 inches. I continued that on both the top and the bottom of the skirt. I actually went in after and cut these lines just on the edges because it was a lot easier to see once you start folding. Then I began to fold all of the pleats. You're basically going to take your first mark and have it meet with your third mark, then fold backwards on the second mark. This took me a while to get the hang of, so I will link the video I watched where she does a much better job of explaining it than me. So then I went ahead and folded the rest of the skirt, making sure to pin in as I went just to hold it all in place. Once all the folds were complete, I took an iron and smoothed out any bumps so that the folds stayed in place and the skirt kind of like sat more proper. Next, I marked out where I wanted the sewn down parts of the skirt to end. You kind of want the sewed parts to start at your waist and kind of finish around your hips. Once you've marked out where you want the sewn down bits to end, you need to figure out how far apart each pleat will be from each other. In order to calculate this, you have to take your waist measurement, subtract that from your hip measurement, and once you have the difference between your hips and your waist, you're going to take that number and divide it by the amount of pleats you have. These calculations are crucial because if you do it wrong, the skirt is not going to fit you. So as you can see here, I'm separating the pleats from each other at the point that I marked off earlier. My measurements ended up being about 0.5 of an inch. So I'm just going ahead and separating each pleat from one another by ½ an inch, pinning them down to hold them in place for now. Don't pin them down the way I did because everything will just end up coming undone when you try to sew it. Once I had all of my pleats separated, I went ahead and sewed each one down to the point that I marked off. And once all the pleats were sewn down, I sewed one side of the skirt to the other so that it was all attached, making sure to leave room for the zipper. So I had the perfect white zipper here, but absolute tragedy struck and I accidentally unzipped it so that the slider was like not on the track anymore. So I went with plan B and I used this red one instead. Unfortunately, it doesn't match, but it is going to be hidden, so it's not that big of a deal. Then I pinned the zipper to the two sides of the dress and sewed them down in place. As you can see, I made sure to leave a flap so that the zipper is actually hidden. Now that the skirt is really shaping up, I just have to do a few finishing touches. So next we're going to add a waistband. So I cut out another piece of fabric that was a little bit longer than the length of my waist and a width that I just thought would look good. I then pinned it to the skirt so that the piece was folded over where the waist was. And then I just sewed it all down so that the waistband was actually attached. I also added a little hook and eye closure just to hold down that flap and keep the zipper hidden. Once I was all done, all that was left to do is hem the skirt to your desired length. And the tennis skirt is done. So this is how the tennis skirt turned out. I am very happy with it considering the amount of time that it took me to make this. I kept like running into so many problems where like I didn't take my measurements properly, and then like when I was trying to attach the zipper and then the zipper unzipped, and then like it was just so annoying. But all things considered, I think I did a pretty good job. I think it like honestly looks pretty professional. I mean, there's some parts that are definitely not perfect. It is unfortunate that I had to end up using this burgundy colored zipper instead of the white one because that would have just looked like a lot better. But it like doesn't really matter because it's pretty much hidden anyways. But yeah, like I'm pretty proud of myself. This is a pretty big project and it's the first thing I've ever made like actually from scratch before, and I think it went like pretty good overall. There is a part here on the side where like I kind of had to steal one of the pleats that was supposed to be like underneath hidden, and I kind of had to pull it out because I realized I didn't give myself any seam allowance, so I kind of had to use that. So the pleat there is kind of a little bit messed up, but it's not that noticeable. Honestly, I'm just glad that it actually fits me because like I kept trying it on throughout the whole process and I was so worried that like it wasn't gonna fit. But I'll definitely leave the video that I watched that was the most like simple and straightforward on how to do this, because my version is gonna be kind of like quick and like not gonna be as in-depth as that one. And because this one took me so much time, I think I am gonna keep it because I don't think it's like even worth selling at this point. I don't know if I'm ever gonna wear it, but I kind of just want to keep it, you know, to like look at my work that I've done. And the fact that this used to be a bed sheet or a tablecloth, I still don't really know what it was. I think it's pretty impressive that it could turn into something like this. So thank you so much for watching my first episode of From Rags to Rad. Please let me know which upcycle was your favorite. I really like all of them. I think they all turned out really well, but the tennis skirt is probably my favorite just because I had to put so much work into it. And let me know if you have any ideas for a next episode. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you later. Bye.